Here we go. Good. It's early.
Yeah,
Good morning. Welcome to At the Round Table with Mamley. I'm your host, Larry Ellison, and in studio, live. We are live this morning, folks. Is my brother for another. He called me this morning and said, "Are we live this morning?" I said, "Yes, we are. It's not Memorex this morning. We are live."
Exactly. I'm happy to be here. I can't hear myself. Oh, am I on?
you're on.
Oh, okay. I can't hear myself. It's nice to be back, man.
Good morning,
Been
Dr.
2
Bradley.
weeks.
How are you?
I'm well.
Yeah, and good morning, Pastor Hobbs. How are you,
I
sir?
am phenomenal by the grace of God.
Yes. So, a lot going on in the world, but, Pastor Hobbs, we always start off with prayer. So this morning I'm going to ask you for a special prayer, if you would mind, for our sister Mary Franklin, who is dealing with some very serious health issues these days. Folks out there, she could use your prayers right now. So I want to say, Pastor Hobbs, if you would mind, sir.
Absolutely. Father God, we do thank you for your grace, for your mercy. We thank you for this day that you've made, and we choose to rejoice and be glad in it. We're grateful, Father, that you are the great I am that I am, everything that we need. So, Father, we stand in agreement and intercession for our dear sister, Evangelist Mary Franklin, Father. We plead the blood of Jesus, Father, over her life. Healing, God. Do a supernatural miracle, Father. We know that with you nothing is impossible, Father. So we come to you as humbly as we know how, and on interceding on her behalf. God, do what only you can do. Take the weak things to confound the strong, and the foolish things to confound the wise, and the lowly things to bring shame to the proud, that no flesh will glory in your presence. God, do what only you're able to do. We submit her into your care, into your hands, God. Again, comfort, God. Heal, God. Just provide, as every good and every perfect gift comes from you. We trust you, Father, to release that for her on today. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right. So we want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guaranteed Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. So like I said, we're going to try to get through this show. We're going to be upbeat with it. We're going to uplift our sister Mary Franklin and her family as they're going through some very trying times these days. So, Dr. Bradley, with that said, how are you, sir?
I'm well. I'm just, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that display, in my opinion, of treason that the January the 6th committee put out.
Yeah.
There you go. I feel a little. I can hear myself now. So I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that because I really think that former president committed several crimes in that situation.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of breathless with anticipation to see exactly what's come up in the subsequent hearings.
Yeah, I think they did a great job on the opening argument there, making their case, and I think if this is any indication of what we're going to see. But there are folks who have the blinders on. But we're going to dive right into that as well this morning. But in our 8 o'clock hour this morning, we have our guest calling in, Doreen Wade. She's with Salem United, presents the Negro Election Day celebration, the 282nd annual festival. Come out and celebrate, register to vote, because you could not. And it goes into what we're talking about, Dr. Rowley, is that folks want to set us back. So it's going to be Saturday, July 16th. 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Salem Willows Park, 165 Fort Ave, Salem, Mass. 01970. For more information, you can contact www.SalemUnitedInc. That's one word, SalemUnitedInc, one word, .org, or SalemUnitedInc@gmail.com. And you can contact President Dorian Wade for more information. She's going to be calling in our 8 o'clock hour, just giving us some more information about that. Mamley will be marching, and as a matter of fact, I will be there. So if you want to march with us, also give us a call. We'd love to have you there as we walk through with our banner, recognizing such an important day. Negro Election Day. I think the governor, because it's been changed to Negro Election Day, is that she found out this is important. If we don't remember our history, acknowledge it, we're seeing ourselves doomed to repeat.
Unfortunately, I'm actually out of town on that day, but I would definitely be there if that wasn't the case in Rochester at a family member's birthday. But
you'll be there in spirit.
I'll be there in spirit.
We'll Zoom it live for you.
I hear you, brother. Because this is where it is, and it's a reason why they don't want us to vote. There's a reason why they're actually, making it against the law to bring water to your loved one or sandwich to the loved one who's waiting in line. There's a reason why they're closing voting polls around your particular area of residence and not make it easy for you. There's a reason why they're asking for licenses or IDs, where you have to have a registry of motor vehicle license as opposed to a college license to vote. There's reasons for that. Just like our ancestors had to deal with the poll taxes and
how many bubbles and bars.
So there's ways that they're trying to come up with. They're sitting out. I wonder if there are people like in a room sitting down, kind of figure out ways that make it difficult for us to vote.
Right, and if people don't think that matters, Dr. Bradley, the margins of victory in a lot of these states that they're tackling, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of votes. We're talking about 15,000 votes in most cases, unless I think like Donald Trump was asking the Secretary of State in Georgia, just find me 1,728 votes, whatever. So you see how slim that margin is. But one vote here in Boston, right, with when Julia Mejia, the current city councilor at large, was elected, there was a recall, and it came down to one vote. One vote.
So your vote matters. But there's a reason why. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't be working so hard to convince you that it doesn't matter.
Trying to take it away from
exactly.
you. Trying to take it away from
people, that is where it starts.
Right.
And I understand that folks looking at it as, well, why am I doing it? It doesn't. Listen to me. That is where it starts in this society, and that's why you had situations like we had in Washington back on January the 6th of 2021. That is why you have this problem. Because that individual felt like if your vote shouldn't matter because of what you look like.
That's right.
So therefore, you can give me, get rid of those votes, decertify them because they were not allowed to vote anyway at the beginning of this country. Absolutely. So therefore, it shouldn't matter.
That's right. They're not part of the Constitution.
Oh my Lord.
So before we go any further, I want to say a hearty good morning to Brother Harry Scales and Mrs. Harry Scales. I want to say good morning to those folks there.
Amen.
Still newlyweds, so they may not even be up yet.
Yeah. Well, you know how that goes.
Also,
we won't go there.
Well, listen, it's a Christian broadcast.
In a Christian church.
Right, exactly. I'm just going to say good morning, folks. That is Dr. Bradley. He is on camera. And see, there's a reason why we don't hear him, why we keep his mic turned down. Oh man! So good morning to Brother Harry Scales and Mrs. Harry Scales, like you said, in that honeymoon period. Also, the brothers and sisters at Prince Hall there. Amen. And Dr. Bradley, you weren't here a couple of weeks ago, and we sent out a nice tribute to our brother down in Indiana. So I found the Jacksons, going back to Indiana.
Oh, man.
So I played it in the broadcast. He didn't know it was coming, right? And so he texted me, and so it got a big chuckle out of that. So without further ado,
I think he's they're from the area that he's in, right, Gary, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're going back to Indiana from my brother William Bridgeforth.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, brother. How are you down there? Yeah. So that was quite a treat for him. Like I said, a listening artist. So thank all you folks out there. So if you want to be part of the discussion this morning, the call-in number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685 is the call-in number. So for folks who weren't paying attention, and it should be no one that, unless you really could not, that you were not paying attention to the hearing that took place on Thursday at the nation's capital regarding the insurrection that took place in January 6, 2021, in which clearly, not if there was any doubt, and there are still folks and naysayers, that don't think Donald Trump, that this was spontaneous. It was just interesting, Dr. Bradley, to watch the video, to listen to the testimony of the officers, and even the Donald Trump's own daughter. You knew they were going to try to put a spin on it, where she said she believed Attorney General Barr, that part of the reasons why he resigned was because he told Donald Trump and his minions that this was BS. That this wasn't something that he thought. He knew that he had lost the election. His vote tallier, the people that he paid that night told him, you lost. The numbers don't add up.
You know, first of all, I want to just go back again and just bring forth the thought I had at doing various shows here, and I said that the transfer of power in America is no longer peaceful. Transfer of power will no longer happen in this country with Donald Trump coming up. He will not relinquish that power peacefully. So that's the first thing I want to call out on that. The second thing I want to say is that Donald Trump showed us his cards during the Clinton administration, Clinton election, because he said, "If I can only lose this if it's if it's stolen.
Right.
I can only lose it if they steal it from me." And he was projecting. He was showing where he was going to go with that. He was laying it down that, hey, listen, I'm going to come respond to when I lose this, that this is for fraud.
Right.
And then he won it.
Right.
And he goes, "Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine."
Right.
So he had already shown us exactly where he was going to go with that position, what his narrative would be if he would lose the election. And he ended up losing it. So I wasn't surprised. What I was surprised of, that so many people bought it.
Well, that's true. But I guess the ones that you kind of expected, but people who claim that this Constitution is something that they value and they would die for are in such denial of it, right? That only a few on the Republican side of the aisle, too, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who had the courage, not about party, but about country.
So think about that, Larry. Think about that. Out of all the representatives coming in from the Republican side, you only have two that are willing to step forward and say this was wrong, and I'm going to honor my oath.
Well, let me because see, this is where the hypocrisy, Dr. Bradley, in like they said, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? They thought they believed it too until they got the call to kiss the ring from Donald Trump, because the day after, a lot of them, including Mitch McConnell as well as Kevin McCarthy, and who wants to be the Speaker of the House. This is more about power. Stood on the floor and said Donald Trump was responsible for this. And then 2 days later, you realize politically that Donald Trump still had the power that he did with the party, that he ran down there to kiss the ring and get the photo with Donald Trump. So they don't believe their stuff, but they care more about themselves and their power than they do about this is what the hypocrisy of when these folks say that they're strict constitutionists. The Constitution, Donald Trump is the only president in history that did not concede, that did not transfer the power peacefully.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that in this country people model. You think it was easy for Al Gore?
Oh, but even with that, go back in history, it wasn't even easy for Lincoln. When Lincoln thought he was going to lose,
and that came up, right?
And Lincoln, in fact, I think
Liz Cheney had the letter
he wrote,
right.
And he forced his entire cabinet to sign it to say, "Wait a second, if I should lose this, we're going to participate in the peaceful transfer of power." He didn't lose the election, obviously, but he had already laid the groundwork for a peaceful transfer. This guy, and again, I'm just shocked that everybody bought this thing, man. Everybody actually shouldn't say everybody, but people basically said, this is stolen. Come on, man. What evidence? I just don't get it.
I don't think that these people even think it's that. I think this is an opportunity for folks who felt like they, for some reason, like I said, when they're talking about this replacement theory, right, that this was an opportunity for them to have within their mind this legitimate argument of why this country belongs to certain people and not to all.
Well, but we can go back to history, and I'm a student of history. You wouldn't have a country if not for black men. Let me explain this to you. All right, when you go back and you study the events around the War of Independence, the war to break away from the rule of Britain. During that war, we had to bring together an army, create an army. The first person in the army was Washington. When they made him the general, now he had to create a standing army. All right, and at the beginning, when they started to create the army, it was a practice that only white men can serve in the army. Only white men could be armed. Well, the problem was they didn't have enough white men to arm a standing army and a state militia simultaneously. And so at some point, they realized that if we're going to fight and beat the strongest army in the world, we need to arm the free blacks and the slaves.
Yeah.
Only one colony said absolutely not, and that was South Carolina. All right? Even Georgia, said we're going to arm it, because if we don't arm it, we're not going to defeat this army, and we're all going to hang.
Right.
And so they ended up defeating the armies. That's the first time. All right? Then after they had defeated the army and they got their independence, they created the Article of Confederacy. And the Article of Confederacy basically made America look like Europe today. We had these individual states who had their own individual sovereignty. So they created their own laws. They created their own currency. They engaged into, foreign policy. And then Madison and Hamilton and others were like, this is not working. So they came back and created a constitutional government. It's during that time, South Carolina said, if this federal government does not support slavery and replace the slaves that we lost to St. Augustine, Florida, the Spanish, then we're not going to support it. We're going to walk away from it.
Wow.
All right? And then South Carolina, it was like, well, okay. They're trying to, they bargained our ancestors to form the union that we have now, what we call the United States. So that's your history.
Right.
So this would never happen without America, about black men.
To your point, you're listening to At the Round Table with Ma'am Leo.
Come on,
the call-in number 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. Dr. Bradley is really giving us a very well-rounded history lesson here. I was looking, just tying in, and we're going to talk about that in our 9 o'clock hour, the rededication of the 54th fighting up, because to your point is that we have not gotten credit. You're talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, and there is so much that black soldiers dead, even in the Civil War, even in the more current wars, even at the Tuskegee Airmen, they never lost a fighter, never lost a plane. That they were so good that the white pilots did not want to go anywhere without them having cover.
Hey, they were so good. The white pilots said, "Hey, listen, I don't know about you." And these are the pilots down among themselves having a conversation, saying, "But I want to get home to my family." Right. These dudes have never lost a bomber.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm going with them,
that's
regardless of the color of the skin, because this is about life.
It's about ability.
It's about so don't tell us that we haven't made a contribution.
Right. But this is why I say that it's important that we don't wait for someone else to tell our history.
We're going to have our own history.
This is why this broadcast is so important, because a lot of things that I've heard from you, and call it ignorance, I would have never heard in class or in this country, in history. It just doesn't get discussed. And what we're seeing now is a regression of anything. You want to ban history. In certain states, in Florida, the governor down there, Ron DeSantis, is losing his mind.
They want to ban it because, if you begin to understand the contribution that Black America made, you ask the question, why are we treating them this way? Because it wouldn't be it. You wouldn't have the United in the United States if you didn't have them.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So if you begin to understand the contribution, you begin to understand that, the country can't move forward without having an honest conversation about how America treats people of color, in particular African American in this nation.
I was listening to a broadcast on NPR, and they were asking out in France, and they was with the how their government works over there. It's a little different than here, but they were asking one of their residents there if they would like to have their government or emulate the way here how it works over there, because it's a little more complicated. You can be the president, but then almost in some ways, though, the Congress, if the Senate or Congress, it really ties the hands of the president. And they were asking that the prime minister is not appointed; they're elected. So then you could have two opposing people, the president and the prime minister, having this power and having their own loyalty. And they asked the woman, "Well, would you want to have a system like they do in America?" She said, "Absolutely not." She said, "In America, they discriminate against black people for just being black."
That's right. That's right. And folks may look, and they're very clever about it, because if you think about this, let's take the Second Amendment, for instance. All right. Now, a little bit of history. The Second Amendment was never actually put together because of the fact that they wanted everybody to be armed. They wanted everybody to be armed for a purpose.
Right.
All right. And so the argument was about militia versus citizens being armed.
Right.
They wanted to arm the citizens so they could have a militia, and they wanted the militia to be controlled by the state as opposed to the federal government. Because if the militia was controlled by the federal government, then the states could be left without protection.
Right.
Protection from whom?
Right.
Slaves.
Exactly.
That was the issue.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was protection
Right.
from people who were rebellion
Right.
because they were enslaved. You know, and I'm going back to the discussion during the 1787 around the Constitution when Patrick Henry said, you know what, I'm sorry, maybe it's a little bit farther back when they was talking about taxation.
Yeah.
All right, right before they started to build an army to deal with the British. And it was a South Carolina representative, his name slipped me, that said, we are not going to pay taxes on the heads of a slave. Why? Because slaves are property. And Benjamin Franklin turned around, who had a zeal for actually going directly to the point.
Yeah.
Property doesn't.
Well, you know,
revolt.
to that point,
Property doesn't rebel.
right? To that point, because every time, like, and people don't understand, like, you're a homeowner as well, is that every time I'm doing a closing on a property and I see that word chattel there, it just because
Yeah.
that's what we refer to.
Yes.
Property.
Exactly.
Chattel.
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 know,
People
and
don't
that-
understand. It's,
so-
I'm like,
You hit my heart, brother.
right. So
Yeah.
you know, right?
Yeah.
'Cause- and but words matter.
Yes.
And most people read that same document, not understanding their
And don't even
history.
think about it. Won't even think about it. Wouldn't even hit the head. You know, that's how white America has been clever about it. They change their narrative, and they forget certain parts of history. Because if you bring up certain parts of history, you realize that this country was created on the backs of slaves, and the total annihilation,
Right.
annihilation of the indigenous people here.
Right.
That's just your history.
And that's the thing that, you know, if you're asking, you know, everybody to leave who doesn't belong here,
So why don't you leave?
close the door, close the door, and close the door on your way out.
Exactly, because you don't belong here. You know what I mean?
Close the door on your way out.
And so this whole idea is that America was created by only white people. It's just false. It's a false narrative.
Well, exactly. So they're coming over on the Mayflower, right, from another country. And the other hypocrisy is the reason why they claim that they didn't want to be tied to England was because of the lack of representation. And so here we are. You know, like I said, I want to go back to Florida for a second because even with all these shootings, the Texas shooting and Uvalde, and then it's been I think it's 280 something mass shootings in this year alone. This year alone, I didn't even realize that because what they consider anything more than 3 is a mass shooting. That we're in the Republican Party, we're formulating dictators because what they saw is that Donald Trump has gotten permission to be the George Wallaces of today. And for folks who don't know, with George Wallace, he was the governor of Alabama who was a big segregationist. You know, I mean, ran on it.
Until his last days, he started to apologize for going.
Right. No, right. I mean, and that was just politicians. I mean, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it now at the state level that in certain states where that is the litmus test. How much of a racist you are for you to get elected. And we're seeing these folks get elected to take over and control the state houses and the secretaries of state. So that, like in Pennsylvania, the governor appoints the secretary of state. It's not an elect. Who do you think that Donald Trump and them are trying to do? Is they're trying to put in place?
See, that's the fear. That's what I'm afraid of.
Exactly.
Right there. That's what frightens me. That's why I keep saying that our democracy or our representative republic, if you want to be, specific about it, is in peril.
Absolutely.
Because he's already putting in the steps, laying the groundwork for the next time.
Right.
What if Florida? What if Georgia would have said, "Okay, here's the votes you're looking for," and we'll recall these slates? What if that would have happened? You know what I mean? Where would we be today? Could we have a radio show like this?
Well,
would we be a nation that's ruled so-called by law as
Right.
opposed to by men?
Right.
So that's what really frightens me.
Absolutely.
What's
And
gonna,
to that point, that Roe v. Wade, the abortion that they seem to think is going to be overturned. Numerous states have trigger laws that have been on the books
Yep.
forever
Yep.
that says that if the Supreme Court decides that abortion is illegal, they don't have to do anything. It just goes into effect. They've been waiting for this day, waiting for this day to happen. So how many other trigger laws are there on the books as it relates to same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, right? And Clarence Thomas better be careful on that one, right? Because that's one of the discussions they're talking about, is that they're saying that this is not a fundamental right. This is states' rights. And we know that states, you should be free no matter what state you live in. Certain inalienable rights, right? But in certain states, and now you have like in Florida, I have to keep going back because here's a governor who is using taxpayer money. First, he's gone after Disney, and now because the Tampa Bay Rays tweeted out about the guns and the gun laws there, that we don't need those type of weapons, he took $35 million from them, from their park, because of taxpayer money. I mean, so you're using funding taxpayer money to the fund. This is a dictator. But yet, around the world, we talk about North Korea and Vladimir Putin. This is what you expect in those countries. Guess what? It's here in America.
Yeah, I want to go back to Roe versus Wade because I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, now, first of all, I want to put it this way: I have a respect and love for life. As a man of Christ, I cannot condone taking a life. Yeah, that's the first hit. But as it relates to freedom, I feel that government has no rights in the decision that a woman would make about her body. I don't understand how you can say I'm a free country, but yet you're telling the person this is what you have to do under all circumstances. And I think, when you taking away one right, you're going down a slippery slope.
Right.
Because if you think about it, there's only 5 rights that are guaranteed under our Constitution.
Right.
This right for speech, religion, press, assembly, and the rights to petition the government. So everything else goes to the state.
Okay.
All right. So what is there to say if I take your rights to make a decision about what you're going to do with your womb as a woman? I don't have one. You don't have one. But these men are saying this is the deal. You can't have this child. You must have this child under all circumstances. All right. If I take that right, then what is there precluding? What is there preventing me from saying you can't marry this Hispanic woman, or you can't marry this Hispanic man, or you can't marry this? I mean, where is that? What's right out? Where does it stop? That's my point.
Well, it's already because again, this ties in what I was saying about the governor in Florida, free speech, right?
Yep.
That this governor is saying that if your speech isn't in alignment with me, I will punish you. I will crush you.
That's dictatorship.
Right. What he said to Disney is that, okay, you're saying that you are in favor of something that I'm against. Now I'm going to take taxpayer dollars from you. You're saying to the Tampa Bay Rays, oh, you speaking out against it, and I'm in favor of people having these weapons. I'm going to take tax dollars. This isn't his money.
But see, now that is Florida. But that same guy has his eyes on the presidency.
Exactly.
Take that mindset and put it in the Oval Office.
Right.
And now you're saying, okay, the state of Massachusetts, if you don't support this, then I'm not going to put taxes into your state.
Right.
So I'm going to use the purse string to convince you to go along with what. So how is that not dictatorship?
It is, because we know that if the Republicans take over the Congress and the Senate, nothing will get done for the next 2 years, hoping that they'll have a president that will be in line with their thinking, a Ron DeSantis type, And folks, that's why I say, folks, don't get comfortable because you live in Massachusetts.
No.
Don't get comfortable because you live in Massachusetts. What happens in Georgia is going to affect you here. And even like
what happened in Georgia doesn't stay in Georgia, trust me.
Dr. Bradley, did you hear the interview the other day with Herschel Walker, who was running against...
Oh, Lord. Oh Lord! I mean, Lord, give me strength. That was horrible.
Did you hear it? You heard it?
I heard pieces of it. I didn't hear. I did not hear it in its entirety. Right. But I think the guy is not there.
He has said that he has mental health, and they think that he may have that concussion that the NFL players, right? That brain injury.
Yeah. I don't think he saw there.
No, what they did was they found another black man,
Malcolm X,
a Republican, to run against another black man, right?
Malcolm X statement about whenever we catch them in this situation, they always find another black man to say, no, it's not him. When I saw that, that's what that comment came to my mind.
Right.
You know, it's pitiful.
Right. He's running against Arnak. They figured, okay, some folks will see him as a black man, even though he's a Republican,
and they'll vote for him.
Right. I mean, all he is in my opinion, is a useful idiot. Because how do you listen to him and say, wow? I mean, he couldn't even stay on topic.
No.
I mean, and he has said, you know, the domestic abuse that, you know, that he admitted to putting a weapon, a gun, to his ex-wife's head. I mean, this is
who they're bringing forward to run to represent.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord!
What? Yes, it's. I mean, I heard that. I was like, wow.
He won overwhelmingly, by the way,
And because it's one side, the Republican side. You know, the Republican. So we're in trouble. 617-282-0685.
We're in trouble.
617-282-0685. We're discussing the hearing that took place this past Thursday on the insurrection.
Just to comment, Patrick Wilson is tuned in and said, "I'm thoroughly
morning, sir.
enjoying the history discussion."
funny.
He is thoroughly enjoying the history discussion.
Oh, well, thank you, sir. Thank you. You know, and I do encourage you to read it and research it, because again, that's where it all starts, and people have to understand. While, you know, the Second Amendment and other amendments should apply to us, but those are just words.
Right.
How is it operationalized in our institutions? That's where the rubber hits the road.
But
how does the criminal justice system interpret it when it's been applied to a black or person of color?
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right, but the danger in when you hear these comments is when folks talk about strict constitutions. Again, when you look at the signing and the formulating of the Constitution, there were no women, there was no one that looked like us there, right? So if you're talking about being a strict constitutionist, then you have to want me to agree with a document that I have no say. And matter of fact, that didn't even identify people like me as a human being. I know what you're talking about.
But Larry, think about this. You know, strict constitutionalists, right? The Constitution was written by 55 delegates. It was actually written by Madison, but it was 55 delegates in Philadelphia. 25 of them were slave owners. Think about that.
Right.
You know
Wow.
what I mean? So 25 of the 55 were slave owners.
Right.
George Washington had 3 of his slaves with him when he came. You know what I mean? And so the mindset was all about, how do I protect this institution of slavery?
Right.
So how do I protect enslaving people that look like us?
Right. So,
our ancestors.
Right. So that's my point you're making for me as well, is that how is it that you expect me to say that I want to be a strict constitutionalist when I know
Exactly.
that if I always say, Dr. Bradley, that if one of them there, one of the slave owners most likely, had thought for any reason, any moment, that anyone in the future would have interpreted when they said all men are created equal, when they were talking about that, they didn't see us as even human beings.
No, we
were
not.
chattel, property.
Yes.
That they would have put in there all white men.
That's right. They would have put in all white men, because they didn't even think about the idea that at one point we would be seen as human.
Right.
We were less than, and that thought was not just originated in America. That thought was all throughout of Europe, because they had already come over to Africa and plundered Africa of its resources. You know, starting with the Arabs, then you had the Portuguese, then you had Spanish, and you know, and it's all about gold, because that part of the world was starving until they discovered, wow, there's precious minerals in Africa, so let's get out there and get it. And then, oh, by the way, these people can tolerate sun, so let's get them. You know what I mean? So the issue here is that we were never seen as a human being. But this is my question. What if the tables were flipped? If I came, my people would have come to Europe and brought you back to Africa. You know what I mean? And say, you know, you're less than human because you couldn't interpret the language because it wasn't your language. You know what I mean? So we have to understand that it was never written for us.
But it even in England, it was something very similar to what you're talking about, right? Was that they did not want to be taxed without having a voice, right? So it's
Yes.
the same thing.
Yes,
and
it's-
it's
yes.
similar. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't being enslaved is not the same as being attacked. But what I'm saying is that they were fighting to be free, free of oppression.
Yes, yes. And I think that was Franklin's issue was, all human beings will yearn to be free. Because you have to think about it. When we talk about the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad ran south before it ran north. It ran south in the 1700s because Spanish owns Florida. And also African Americans, slaves were actually rebelling. And I'm thinking of the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Was a huge rebellion that people were actually, got weapons, fought, and tried to get to St. Augustine because the Spanish was basically saying, if you come here, you're free. That's why South Carolina said, I want my slaves back.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And so when you start to understand your history, you start to understand, okay, well, these institutions, all the institutions that are governing, my education, my loans, my freedom, this stuff was happening before those institutions were created. So if they're happening before the institution was created, then it's logical that the institution was created with those thoughts in mind.
Right.
If those institutions were created with those thoughts in mind, then how do now the cultures of those institutions are created in such a way that it alienates people like you and I because we don't look like
Right.
the people who it was created to serve.
Right.
When you start thinking that way, you realize how the country is the way it is today.
They tell on themselves the fact that you have to enact laws for voting rights for women and people of color and for black people says it all. That your initial document was not intended to to represent everyone.
No, it's a lie.
Right.
The
Right.
whole thing is a lie.
But you
know?
want me to be a strict constitutionalist.
Strict constitutionalist to me is another fancy way of saying that I'm racist.
Right.
That's what it's saying to
Right.
me. Because as a man of color that understands what was the circumstances that were on the table when it was written, I wasn't represented.
But it almost would be like asking Jewish people to pay honors to Hitler. Right.
Hello.
Right.
Hello.
That's just crazy.
Makes
Right.
no sense to me.
That anything that during Hitler's time that want to be reenacted, that people would go along with it.
Well, that's what we got. And so we have to understand as a people that America is living this bifurcated, for lack of a term, existence, where on one side of the ledger is for certain people, and the other side of the ledger is not for other people. We have to understand that, what is our history so we can understand why people are reacting to us the way that, in our present, the way that they're reacting.
Right.
We have to understand our history.
Right. But even speaking of the history piece, and then going back to this hearing, that even that, Dr. Bradley, even during Richard Nixon, right, in the Watergate break-in, right, the Republicans said, "Hey, the facts are the facts." And I guess, have you no decency? Here, the facts aren't even. I mean, it's the spin that is trying to be put on this, that this is an unfair, this is an attack, this is a witch hunt. See, all those words, but the truth is the truth.
Yes. Yes.
It's painful if it was, and yes, the Republicans paid a political price for it, but at least they stood up for the right of the rule of the law, rule of law. Because I think what they don't understand as well is that history is not kind, and as Liz Cheney said, Donald Trump will be gone, but you will be remembered.
Your honor will be remembered forever.
Dishonor.
Yeah,
Dishonor.
exactly. Well, her honor. I mean, I have a lot of respect for her. Don't agree with her for her
Policies.
political philosophies.
This
but
is not
I respect her.
It's not a policy issue.
Yeah.
This is a right or wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what's troubling here. This is right or wrong. So you can't expect me to believe in your Constitution, that piece of paper, and watch the performance that I'm seeing from our lawmakers.
Well, I talked to some people that look like us and asked them if they were on watch, and they said, I'm not interested. Some of them were military folks.
Wow.
Some of them were former military people. And this was my, and I understand the frustration. Don't get me wrong. I do understand the frustration. Don't necessarily agree with their action. My position was, and some of the individuals, my family members, by the way, my position is I would be turning my back on all those soldiers, male and female, who fought throughout the history of our country for rule of law as opposed to rule of men if I don't watch this thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I was ready to fight for the rule of law. You know, so as a military man, I'm saying to myself, I gotta watch this. You know, you realize that the Confederate flag was walking through the halls of our government?
I bet they didn't miss the Celtics game last night.
I bet they didn't.
Right. That was more important. That's what I'm saying is with Dr. Bradley.
Which I don't follow, by the way.
Right. We are so. I didn't watch.
Just let me just change gears real quickly. Give me one team in the NBA, another team in the NBA that has a logo that represents a particular culture of people.
No, I don't know of any.
The only one.
I don't know of any.
The only one is the Boston Celtics. I'm sorry.
No, you that too.
The Boston Celtics.
That was a fraudulent slip, but probably applies.
But that's the only team in the league that has a logo, that has a stamp that represents only a culture of people. Everybody else got something that everyone in the entire city can relate to, except Boston. I don't know anything about a Celtic. I don't know anything about, I'm a black man. Look at me. Look at me. You know what I mean? Come on. What did I know about, a four-leaf clover?
Right.
But that's my point. Right. So I'm like, nah.
Right.
Excuse me. I'm not hypocritical on that issue. Right. Excuse me. I'm not interested.
Right. But and speaking of hypocritical hypocrisy, you look at the folks like the Ted Cruz's and those folks who, I remember when he was running against Donald Trump, and he talked about how his father may have been involved with assassinating Kennedy, and talked about his wife, and he got up there and he berated him, talking about Donald Trump as this coward and sniveling coward, and that he's a liar and all that. He hasn't changed, but this says something about your character. Now, you defend him at all means, right? I mean, all of them, saw him as a joke, and then when he won, this is what said the hypocrisy of it all. And everyone, Donald Trump always claimed he hired the best people. So as soon as someone doesn't agree with him, they're no longer the best people. Bill Barr said, "I'm not going along with this. You lost. So you fired him." That was his second AG because the other guy there, Jeff Sessions, wouldn't go along with breaking the law. So he was saying, he only wants to surround himself with people who would break the law.
Yeah, people who are uneducated. Remember that comment? I love uneducated people.
Right.
I love them because they're so easy to persuade.
But the fact that your vice president, who,
I hear you.
Mike Pence, say what you want. Yeah. And like you said, again, it's not about politics. He knew that he had no right to put down certifying the election that Joe Biden had won. And Donald Trump said he should be hung. That he want to hang him, folks. If he doesn't have any loyalty to a guy who blindly followed him, and he wants him, you think that the minute that you're not doing his bidding for him,
there's no loyalty.
And the fact that clearly this was that some of these Congress people were asking for pardons. What do you need a pardon for if you haven't committed a crime?
That means that shows intent.
They know
that shows
what's
knowledge.
Coming.
Exactly. Yeah, they know it's coming.
Right.
That shows that I acted on this. That shows the criminal mind.
And it shows that you knew what you were doing was
exactly. Other than that, why are you seeking a presidential pardon? I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning, it's Brother Jamal. How y'all doing?
Hey, we're doing this morning, Jamal. I mean,
thanks for that email, Jamal. I appreciate that response, that text with the email.
Oh, absolutely. Did it work out?
No, I don't know. She sent the information. I don't know if there was a response yet.
Okay.
But thank you anyway.
Yes, indeed. So I chimed in when I heard your comment about the Celtics, and it's funny because. As a rapper, years
all that
ago,
we've been talking about in the Celtics something the triggers. Go ahead.
but it's funny because I talked about that here. The sports teams in Boston was so much of my childhood racist trauma.
Wow.
So remember back before the Patriots were any good. What was the guy's name? Was it Grogan? Steve Grogan or something like that?
Yeah, Steve Grogan. Yeah.
So back then, when the Patriots couldn't win against a high school team, right? But there was still a lot of these rabid fans, and I in my rap, I made note of a lot of these images that Dr. Bradley just brought up, and you are correct. This is the only basketball team whose logo denotes a culture, and in fact, I talked to somebody years ago, I met somebody in the NBA, about trying to get them to do a name change, like people, the Cleveland Indians and all that, right? Boy, they looked at me and laughed. Because Boston ain't going for that. Red Auerbach will come back to life and stab somebody.
Yeah.
So, but here, that thing is true. And the rhyme I wrote at the time, I said, look on the side of the Patriots' helmets, what you see. A white man bent over, about to tackle me. All right? And then with the Celtics, I said, you can never get me to put a shamrock on my back, not even with a Glock to my back. So, because in my childhood, that symbol of that shamrock was probably like what a Crip and a Blood is. You know what I mean? Like when a Crip sees that red rag, it's like that. Or really, because it's more really racial, it would be like black people seeing the Klan back then. If me and a couple of my black friends were walking in Cambridge or on Mass Ave or Dorchester or what have you downtown, and there was a group of 9 or 10 of these guys coming with the Celtics jackets on and the little green and white Stan Smith Adidas, the uniform, right?
Yeah.
And they were coming towards me. We would balling up our fists and like, oh, here comes trouble. We knuckling up because we don't know what's about to happen. So I just wanted to say that. And it's funny now, too, particularly with all these young black boys and whatnot, because I don't know for any amount of money, and it would be a question. I'm surprised it has never came up in the public sphere. But, yeah, to get a young black boy from wherever they are in the country, come here, first day of trials, here's your uniform, kid, put this shamrock on your back. It to me, it boggles the mind. I really do think it should get out of here because it is a wink, wink, and a nod at some racist stuff here that happened back in the day. The Celtics enjoy a little bit of a reputation, of course, because they got Bill Russell back in the day, right? So they're supposed to not be prejudiced. But we all know that that's a crock, right? So not only the Celtics institution has racism in it, but obviously the area and the fan base is rabidly racist. Even to the point where the famous story where they went and broke in the man's house after he won championships, broke in the man's house and took a deuce on his bed.
Well, so I think so as a black athlete, which those days are gone for me. I'm over 60. I would not have played for them. And another, I remember my brother, who's now going to be with the Lord, but he was an excellent football player, coming out of English high school back in the '60s, and he got a letter of interest from Notre Dame, and his response. He took the letter, he ripped it up and threw it in the garbage. He said, "I'm not a fighting Irishman. I'm a fighting black man. Why would I go play for a team that's named the fighting Irishman? Look at me. Look how black I am. You know what I mean?" And so that's when and Jamal is right. So we need to think about what we're doing as a people and how we value ourselves.
Well, I think that goes back to
my hit.
Jamal. I want to pivot back to we were talking about the hearings that took place on Thursday. And I know there are more people that watch the Celtics game than watch the hearings. That this is something that's going to impact them. The playoffs will be over, how you feel about the Celtics logo, whatever. But I'm saying is that we're not paying attention to what's really important and what's happening in this country with the regression of our life. What they're putting right out there, that this replacement theory, that they will not be replaced. Right, and we're sitting here continually watching it and doing nothing. I want to get your take on if you watched the hearing, and I know that's just the beginning of it, because I thought they laid out a pretty good opening argument for their case. But also, is it me that just seems like we're sitting in a state of paralysis as far as our response to what's happening around this country?
I think that people are more emboldened than they've ever been, and yet at the same time more scared, if that makes sense.
So are you saying the emboldened side is the other side of the aisle, and we're the scared side? Because that's how I see it. Because I
don't say that.
It's almost like what happens in negative aspects. If I have a crowd of people, I can more easily influence them to do something negative than groupthink them and convince them into doing something positive. Generally, that's how it works. You got a group of 100 kids, you can get them to drink some beer quicker than you get everybody on the same page to get everybody to get an A on the test. So that's at least been my experience. So I think that America is like that right now. Those people who are super fervent, they've just gone on to the dark side. and it's easier to get people to succumb to the most base of natures, to give in to the anger and the fear and all that type of thing, right? Than it is to get the folks to activate on the good, you know. So it's scary. It's messed up. But yeah, the testimonies that was
Dr. Bradley's gonna wait. But I think I think of this time when I read in history like the George Wallaces and the politicians of that needs that we're back to that where Donald Trump is just a symptom of that, right? Where when people feel that people who are elected with that mindset, and then those who give them cover, it only emboldens more of those folks. Like the Klan felt like they had impunity to go around and do what they did because most states, most elected officials, even at the national level, were part of that. And we're heading back in that direction where they feel it's acceptable behavior, and that, like Donald Trump hands out pardons, and these governors can hand out pardons to people who are committing these heinous crimes. Mm-hmm. And that's not just hyperbole. That is real concern to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see it as fear being the motivator of all this. You know what I mean? Especially on the white side of the equation. You know, I think this whole thing around replacement theory is about the fear that while America is growing darker every day, numerical superiority of black people will give them in a representative voting style government the governmental power to do what white people did to them,
right?
You know, so I think there's fear around that. You know, and I think it's that fear that's motivating some of the things that you see. I also think that if you look at history, the Black Power movement, you had the kind of white response to that. You know, Jim Crow, you had a white push to keep that in place and a black response to that. What you got today is the Black Lives Matter movement.
An affirmative action.
You know, so you have all this white pushback. No, this is our country. We were going. And my piece was, you wouldn't have a country without us. You know what I mean? So what are you talking about? It's all of our country. And so that's how I view it. I think the real motive, the impetus, the motivating factors is predicated on fear.
So Jamal, what's your take on this replacement theory issue?
Well, you know, they're talking about, you know, you're not going to replace us. No, it's not us going to replace you. It's science. So, you know, what ends up happening, and as we know, Dr. Bradley's 100% right, but through all of the scientific data that we have about genetics and population and whatnot, not only is everything becoming browner and blacker, right, just by one of their biggest fears from back in the day, that good old race mixing, right? So due to that, obviously a lot of things are happening, but also too, white people are not producing at the rates they used to. So, you know, like in the 50s when people would have, you know, many kids or whatever, average white family now, or what did they used to say, 2 kids and a dog or whatever?
2.5. I never understood how you had half a kid.
Right, that's the dog.
You should, as a police officer, you done dealt with some of these half kids. Right. But yeah, so now it might be down to, you know, just a dog. You know, a lot of couples ain't having kids, or they might just have one, you know, what have you. But the makeup of the quote unquote American nuclear family is changing. Oh, and also too, let's also count in same-sex marriages and whatnot.
Right.
People are getting married to each other. Some of those opt to not have children. Some of those maybe adopt or whatever. But there's a lot of different things in the mix now that change the variables, and it's not looking good for white people, the white family. They're not producing at the same rates, and you know, it is out of fear, and they've known it for a long time because on the black side, we've preached about it. The extinction or the fragility, right, of the white population. And on their side, they have too. That's always been their biggest fear. That's hence why they said you better not be race mixing and doing all this other stuff. So now it is coming true, but it is not the fairy tale fantasy thing of it. It's actually the science. It's just evolution. And this is what's happening.
Well, I think the irony is that the race mixing didn't start with us. It was forced on us way back when.
Like my father used to say, you know, my grandfather used to always say, you hate us during the day, but we the object of your desire at night.
Wow.
You hate us during the day, but you're the object of your desire
knows.
at night.
I mean, you look at what's in that Sturm Thurman, all those folks that had, we find out later on, they had children by black women.
Right. Jefferson, hello Jefferson.
Right.
And you know, I want to bring that up too, because on the world scale, of course, before Europe and all this type of stuff, you know, Africans was traveling around the globe, right? And so there have always been people from two different cultures that might fall in love, you know, based on trade or merchant or visiting a different country or what have you. That has always happened, and often, most often, it was good. It was the merger of two kingdoms. It was powerful, African, Asian, you know, the kingdom of Israel with the kingdom of Ethiopia. These types of things, you know, took place. But what happened very differently in the Europe thing is we're not talking about some, you know, overseas love story here.
Right.
Let's be clear. We're talking about rape. You know, we're talking about mass rape.
Yeah.
You know, you know, so that is a very different thing than, you know, going somewhere and finding a new sweetheart. You know, it was not romantic. It was power based, and it was by force.
That's what made me chuckle when they say, "Well, this is my heritage." So your heritage is slave labor, rape, and murder. That's what you want to honor. You know what I mean? And so this fear around this grand, the total amount, you know, the quantity of race mixing. You know what I mean? That's what changing the complexion of America. What eventually can change the complexion of government. And one last thing, white America gets uncomfortable when the representation of black people go above 13% in this particular nation.
All right.
They get uncomfortable with that.
That's a good segue. We gotta go. It's coming at the top. Jamal, please continue to listen. Matter of fact, you know, I guess Salem United, Doreen Wade is gonna come on and talk about the 282nd annual festival at Salem Willows on July 16th at 8 a.m.
Yeah, I heard y'all talking about it earlier. I'll stay tuned in.
Okay, yeah, because she's definitely trying to get some folks to go out there. Manuel's going to be marching in there, so I'm trying to get some folks to march with us. I hope to be at the community event. Love to have you.
I went to Salem State College, so I got to see if I still got a warrant out there.
All right, well, I'll give you a ride. All right, brother, take care. Keep listening. All right. You've been listening to At the Round Table with Leo. We're going to take our break and we'll be right back.
Got a rock fake Jews who walk around strap. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting